So how many of you know the Midrash, the story actually from the Talmud about, you can sit down, by the way, Bob. If you feel comfortable, I may be here a while. About the pagan who comes to Hillel and Shammai, teach you, right, I will convert if you can teach all the Torah while standing on one foot. How many of you know that one? All right? If you don't know it, it's a pagan who comes to first Shammai and says, "Can you, if you can teach me all the Torah while I stand on one foot, right, then I will convert." Shammai chases him away with a builder's cubit. It's like he was a builder, and so it's like apparently how you would measure it. So he like beat him away like that. He comes to Hillel, and Hillel, by the way, it's interesting. Those of you who I want you to think about conversion and what it means to become Jewish. Hillel, knowing what that condition is, converts him first, and then says, by the way, a famous quote, right? That which is hateful to your neighbor, don't do. To others, the rest is commentary. Go and learn. Now, what's interesting here, by the way, is what he even quoted Hillel. It's a famous interpretation of what we call the golden rule: you shall love your neighbors yourself. It's not really what we would call the Torah itself. By the way, two other times, this is all in the tractate Shabbat, where there's two other times the same thing happens. You think Shammai would have learned his lesson the first time, but no, each time he beats him away, the person who's converting. The second one, some of you may know, it says, I'm willing to convert, but I'm only willing to accept the written Torah and not the oral Torah. Right? Shammai beats him away. Hillel converts him. And then he teaches him the Aleph Bet, Gimel, Dal, all the way through Taf. The next day, he comes back, and he teaches him the other way, from Taf back with different sounds and everything. He goes, wait a minute, but yesterday you taught me the other way. He said, that's the nature of Torah. You have to have the oral Torah with the written Torah, otherwise you'll never understand it. Now, what does that mean about oral Torah? What is Hillel trying to teach here? Discussion about, it's about Torah, but about written Torah. What's he telling us to be careful about the Torah, the written Torah?
It's not an immutable, unchangeable.
It's not an immutable, unchangeable document. Good. Michael?
The interpretation later on throughout the years and understanding can really add to it and make it more clear and more.
So this is going to make it clearer. In fact, sometimes it'll even contradict the written law. Sometimes the oral law will contradict the written law. Michael, yes?
I remember a story about a little boy who, on Yom Kippur, says, I don't know any prayers, I'm just going to say the alphabet, and God says, and let God pray for me. And the rabbis keep themes that are very nice, deep.
It's a great Hasidic story about that just somebody who could do the alphabet. And by the way, this Hasidic idea is that God will actually rearrange the letters in order to make your prayers, right, those that really come from your heart. What else? I mean, what else is this important about in terms of Torah itself? Yeah, Carrie.
Wasn't the Torah communicated orally initially?
So according by the rabbis have to say that oral Torah was also given at Mount Sinai along with the written Torah. Now, by the way, I'm going to say this, right, as a rabbi, it was self-validation. Right? It was the rabbi saying, our tradition was also given at Mount Sinai.
It was given orally first.
Given orally at Mount Sinai. And by the way, the beginning of Pirkei Avot, if you know ethics of our ancestors of our fathers, however you want to translate it, says that Torah was given from God to Moses to Joshua, right, and passed on to each generation. And that is the oral Torah. That's the. It's like that, but it was oral Torah and not the written Torah that they're talking about, by the way. What else can we learn about this? Anybody got? What else? Yes.
To continue to discuss it forever and make it relevant to myself in the moment.
The need to make it relevant in the moment. Yep, Benji. Torah never ends. So our interpretation, so by the way, is revelation at one moment, or is revelation continuous? Is there ongoing revelation? Well, in our portion, there's two verses, actually I think there are three, but two different laws, that actually distinguish significantly, right, and how they're interpreted, Jewish to a Christian tradition, and Jewish law to Sharia, to Muslim law. Right, so I want you to open up to page, if you will, 423. No, let's go 473. 473. No, that's not going to be it. I'm going to give you another one. It's chapter 21, verse 23. My chain, I think. 21, 23. There we go. To page 461. Let's try that. Page 461. Some of you know these verses, okay? I'm on verse 22. When men fight and one of them pushes a pregnant woman and a miscarriage results, no other damage ensues, the one responsible shall be fined according to the woman's husband, we turn the page, may reckon from him, the payment to be based on reckoning. All right? This is, by the way, the most famous text that the rabbis use for not making abortion murder. If you don't know that. All right? The Jewish tradition says that the fetus is not a full life until it comes out. By the way, I'm very careful about the language, full life. Right? That's very important. We could do an hour on what does it mean to be considered a partial life, and when you do it. Judaism does not, by the way, advocate wholesale abortion. You should know that. There's many guidelines about it. I don't want to misrepresent a permissive nature of Judaism. What the rabbis say, it is not murder, based on this verse, right? Because if the woman miscarries, and there's no other damage, he's not liable for murder. In the next verse, a life for a life. Now, that translation of miscarriage is not exactly, perhaps, directly from the Hebrew. Right? What does it say? The Totzel Yeldeha. And how would you translate it literally?
Fall from your hand.
And out comes the child. And so, the rabbis, in their understanding it was a miscarriage. It comes out early and it is not viable. Some Christian Bibles, by the way, not all of them, don't translate this way and say that it was born, they say, prematurely. And it was born alive. It's important to know where Christianity, in terms of gets this understanding about the prohibition of abortion, is from. This is the text, by the way, that they argue over, Jews and Christians, about the meaning. It's a big difference between how you understand it, isn't it? Whether it's miscarriage or it's premature. Defined, by the way, by oral tradition by the rabbis, it's very clear, right, that the baby was born premature, and there are no other damages to the baby or to the mother. Now, any questions about that or no? That's straightforward. How you understand text will create a distinct and very powerful different understanding about some of the most powerful issues of life and death. Now, the next verse, by the way, which many of you know this, hold on, and how does it continue? Verse 23, but if other damage ensues, the penalty shall be life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. Now, by the way, Sharia law takes this literally, but by the way, I've learned so much. I've been in dialogue with the local imam from the West Valley Islamic Center, and he says, much like rabbinic tradition, that the Quran and later authorities did everything they could to limit the times that you could actually apply it. Isn't that interesting? Much like our Jewish tradition, those of you who study rabbinic law, how they try the rabbis when they don't like something, diminish when you can say, you know this, they're going to make sure you can't apply it, or it's going to be a minimal amount of time. In fact, by the way, in the Ben Sorer Moreh, when you have a rebellious child, right, who rebels against his parents, what's the punishment in the Torah? You're supposed to be put him to death. And then the rabbis go back and forth and arguing about how, like, what are the conditions by which you could actually apply it? But then in the end, the rabbis finally say, by the way, don't ever think it was ever applied or you can never apply it. They made it really clear. In this text, the rabbis go through lots of legal arguments to demonstrate that this should not be taken literally. But I want you to understand, they didn't say we understand life differently now, and therefore we want to understand it differently, right? Now, that's a different understanding. What they're saying is, because they want to be careful, the rabbis, don't ever think that this should be taken literally. It never was. Right? They give examples like, if a one-eyed man, right, pokes out the eye of another one who has two eyes, right? Does that mean that you poke out his second eye so that he's blind? Right? They back and forth in arguments to show, and by the way, the beauty of I love rabbinic traditions, out of this come the 5 categories of civil damages that are paid in cases of jurisprudence that are still applicable to today. That's amazing on the record. So 2 verses, one which distinguishes itself in very powerful ways in our culture about attitudes of abortion, and the other one that teaches differences in terms of how we punish and what we consider to be humane. The rabbis, the oral tradition was always trying to understand the context of the written law and to be able to make it what they thought was relevant and that in the sense of interpretation was considered moral and ethical. 2 examples, right, one after another, about how without that oral law, the written law really becomes meaningless. The rabbis were magnificent in terms of making the Torah much more relevant in our lives. I, for one, am grateful to them.